Let me share some stories with you. May 1948, Israel's War of Independence. You realize that after the Holocaust, Israel was given the rights by the UN to have her own nation. They partitioned the land, said part of it will go to the Arabs, part of it will go to the Jews. The Jews said, fine, thank you. The Arabs said, no, we want it all. And we're going to kill all the Jews on the day that the UN pulls out. That's what they said. 7 armies combined to destroy Israel on her birthday. Israel had no army because they weren't permitted to own guns, but they'd been smuggling them in through the US and other countries. People were training in secret. And those 7 armies failed. During the battle, on day 5, 5 Jewish men were up on a hill right outside the old city of Jerusalem. And as they're sitting on the hill, they saw coming up the hill thousands of enemy soldiers. Thousands. 5 guys. They look at one another. I can imagine the things they said. Dang. After that, some other words I don't use. Now it gets better. Because the first soldier to speak says, I've only got 5 bullets left. Second soldier said, I've got 6. Third guy said, I'm down to 1. I don't know about the other 2. He didn't make the news. So they shoot off their bullets. They duck down behind the sandbags. Say, at least we didn't run. At least we're dying like soldiers. Then all of a sudden, from the approaching Arab army, they start to hear screams and yells. Men yelling out, Ibrahim! Ibrahim! Abraham! Abraham! And they look over the sandbags, and the guys are going like this, and they turn around and run. And the guys are like, and they're probably throwing rocks. Yeah, get on out of here, you know. That's the story. 19 years later, one of those 5 guys is telling the story to somebody in the marketplace. He said, I don't know, it's the craziest thing. We were out of ammo. There was only 5 of us. We were surrounded, and all of a sudden they started yelling, Abraham, Abraham, and they took off. Well, in the marketplace, somebody was listening to his story. And he said, excuse me, are you telling the story about that hilltop during the battle on the 5th day, so? And this was an Arab guy. He says, yeah. He says, I was one of those guys. I was there. They shook hands, you know, old war veterans kind of a thing. And he said, why'd you guys run? We were out of ammo. There was only 5 of us. What happened? He said, standing behind you was this huge man with outstretched hands. And we thought it was Abraham come to protect you. So we fled. That's the story. Isn't that wild? True story. The eyewitnesses, they're still alive today. They've been interviewed. That was 1948. 1973, Yom Kippur War. Jewish people are fasting and praying, combined assault of several armies. They almost lost. It was a horrible time for them. So a squad of guys are sent on a mission. It's kind of dark out, and all of a sudden the commander says, stop, stop, stop! Everybody freezes. Somehow he discovered they were in a minefield. Now what do you do when you're in a minefield? You can't retreat because you don't know how many steps in the minefield you are. You might have been lucky up to this point. You could take 1 step in any direction, you could be blown up. So they took out their bayonets. At an angle, they started poking at the ground. Now, mind you, a minefield could have had 10,000 mines in it. They could have been there for a year. So they just started poking at mines, trying to dismantle them. They had no other choice. Then a very remarkable thing happened. Andrew, would you please go kill the lights? I want to, instead of tell you what happened, I'm going to show you an interview with one of the guys that was there. And by the way, before you play the video, I played this video yesterday. And one of the guys in the audience is a guy who just finished his tour of duty in the Israeli Defense Forces. And when I shared this story with him, he said to me, they took us to that place. It's a very famous site, and they tell us the story. So this is very current, very modern. Kill the lights, Andrew. Get them all.
יש כאן איזה 100,000 מוקשים. לא חייבים לזחול את הדרך שלנו החוצה.
You take out your bayonet and you start finding mines.
This was a life-threatening situation. In other words, if you went forward, it was dangerous. What about just retreating?
Whichever way, whether it's to the left, to the right, backwards or forwards, I mean, it's a minefield. We did the best we could. And we dug ourselves, we managed to expose a few and dismantle them. And it was a very slow process. But at this particular point, a very, very strong gust of wind came. Something which we could not explain at all. I mean, it was so strong that we literally felt that we were flying away. That's how strong it was. And mines that were buried 25, 30 centimeters in the ground just exposed themselves, and we didn't have to dig them out. We were just walking through them.
This is something I gather you hadn't seen the likes of before.
No way did we see that. In fact, when we came back, nobody could understand that. And of course, we didn't think of it as a miraculous thing from God or anything. You know, we just thought, well, that was just a fluke, a wind that came, which we couldn't explain, and that was it.
Well, when did the thought first hit you that it might have been an act of God?
When we came back and we're alive. When we really touched ourselves and thought, well, we're alive.
What is a miracle?
A miracle is a supernatural occurrence, something which you cannot explain, but it does happen. A wind like this didn't happen before. It didn't happen afterwards. The minute these mines were exposed, that was it. There was no more wind. It was like the calm after the storm.
What's the food for thought I need to take with me in order to get it the way you think it is?
What do you think? I mean, that's just astounding. Just astounding. Never been a wind like that before, never after. Immediately after the mines were exposed, the wind was gone. Buried, I don't know how deep 30 centimeters is, but that's several inches of dirt blown away. They said it was so powerful, we thought we were going to get blown away. I'm sure they were thankful for that wind. The Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. It happens. It happens. In the old days, it happens in the new days. God's got a plan. He does his plan, and he is mighty to save. There was a time, there's two prophets in the Bible that everybody always confuses, because in English their names sound similar, and they ministered together and back to back. Elijah and Elisha, right? You've heard of them? Well, in Hebrew, they don't sound alike at all. It's Eliyahu and Elisha. Elisha was Elijah's disciple, and Elijah went up to heaven, and Elisha continued the work. Well, they were at war with Syria, and Elisha the prophet kept sending messages to the king. He said, don't encamp in this area, the Syrians will be there. A couple weeks pass, don't encamp in this area, the Syrians will be there. In the meantime, the Syrian king keeps missing everybody, and he's getting ticked off. And he goes to his men, one of you is spying for the Israelis, and I want to know who it is. Let me read to you from the Bible this story. Time after time, when the king of Syria was at war against the Israelites, he met with his officers and announced, I've decided where we'll set up our camp. And each time, Elisha would send this warning to the king of Israel. Don't go near there. That's where the Syrian troops are going to set up their camp. So the king would warn the Israelite troops in that place to be on guard. The king of Syria was furious when he found out what was happening. And he called in his officers and asked, which one of you has been telling the king of Israel our plans? None of us, your majesty, one of them answered. It's an Israelite named Elisha. He's a prophet, so he can tell his king everything, even what you say in your own room. Well, go get him. We'll put an end to that right away. Get him. So they found out what town he was in, which village, and he sent a huge army, and they surrounded the village. Next morning, now my first question is, why did they surround the village? Why didn't they just go in and get the guy? Next morning, I imagine Elisha wakes up, Elisha, gets out of his tent or his little house and okay, what's for breakfast? Now, his servant gets up. Similar thing. Master, master, we're surrounded. What do we do? We're going to die. What do we do? And he said, we're fine. There's more on our side than their side. And then he said, God, open his eyes so he can see. And God did something so he could see the spiritual world. And he saw that these guys were surrounded by angels.